Dr. Manjari is a leading psychiatrist in Mumbai. She has a number of years of work with children and adolescents under her belt. And we look forward to listening, what are her thoughts, her views and experiences in this particular situation. So thank you again, Manjari, for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Trupti is a psychologist, has been an occupational therapist, and is heading a resource room at the Lokhandwala Foundation School. Apart from that, she has a very interesting private practice in Mumbai. And Dr. Trupti and I go decades and decades back. So, Dr. Trupti, thank you very much for joining us. I look forward to listening to, three women who have been in this field of working with children in the sphere of education and mental health for so many years. So, our topic for today is coping and compassion in the classroom as life skills, and that's the need of the hour. I feel that today we don't just need it in the classroom. I think we are all going to need it in the time to come. So one particular request to all the participants. One, please keep yourselves on mute as well as your videos off, because it can be distracting to the panelists. And to, make sure that you're not presenting. I know that gets a little confusing. That tab is a little confusing. So Karuna Pingle, I think you're presenting. So I know we make all these mistakes because we are all onto this, in a way, in a new way. So that's fine. But, just try and just do that. Okay. So as educators and people in the mental health sphere, we know that, even under the best of circumstances, children need periodically a reassurance from us that, they live in a safe world, that they are being loved and protected by their significant caretakers. And I think this is important for them because, that helps them maintain their own self-respect, their respect for others, to build up their coping skills, their compassion. However, we can't really expect children to be going on to school, learning, problem solving, taking tests and exams, expecting them to be compassionate for the world around them if they're living in a state of uncertainty, a little bit of fear about the unknown and what's happening because they're seeing the adults around them also worried. And then there are also those children who are actually experiencing loss and grief in their family, right? So my first question is to you, Dr. Manjari, that, there might be children who have not experienced loss and grief. I mean, that's the larger number as of now, but they're still struggling to cope with the current situation. What do you think are some of the issues that they are going through? What might be their thoughts? That's what, I would like you to speak about, whatever you have through your experiences.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Doctor, for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. So what I can say is I think there are a couple of reasons why all of us, children and adults, are undergoing this extreme anxiety during this pandemic. I think it boils down to three main things. One is we're kind of grieving our lost past life, so the life that we lived pre-COVID. One is, of course, the fear of uncertainty of future. We don't know with regards to lockdown, with unlocking and everything coming back to normal, the new normal, how we'll adjust to the new normal. And the third thing is the fear of the illness itself. So if you talk to anybody, it's one of these three main reasons that we are all fearful of, including me. All of us are going through that. Now, what happens is as adults, obviously, we speak, we verbalize a little more. Children have difficulties. So recently, I was just talking to a 10-year-old, about what he thought. I mean, this was at the start of the lockdown, right at the start of lockdown. And the mother saw some behavioral changes. And that time, there was not even much known about Corona, COVID. The lockdown also hadn't begun. But it just happened that he heard on one day or, in the news that, there is this virus coming in from China and there are going to be a lot of people affected and somebody died. Now, at the start, when India wasn't even, really affected, he got this sudden anxiety because he just heard about this and he just assumed that, this is going to come to India and all my people are going to get affected, including me. So it was like, a fear of uncertainty. So do not understand this possibility, probability. For them, anything that is possible is also very probable. So I think this especially leads to a lot of fear. Also, of course, being at home, not having a structure which they were so used to, that sudden disruption of structure, and being at home stuck with parents is like a hostage like situation. You're stuck with your parents all the time. You're not used to seeing them 24/7. Personal experience, I have a small child. It's little difficult because we've not stayed together all this while, especially teenagers. They need their knee space with, in India obviously houses are small, etc. So all this has led to a lot of difficulties. Also, children even at very young ages are aware of the financial implications also. So I had a 10-year-old who got to know that his father may lose his job. His immediate worry was, he studies in an IB school, so immediate worry was, will I be shifted? My parents will probably say that I cannot do that. So I think all the fears that children are facing, from fear of illness, to fear of parents catching illness.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Manjri. Vasanthi, my next question is to you. Yes. So as educators, okay, how can we help children? So when I say educators, I'm talking about teachers, I'm talking about school leaders. What is your thought? What can you share with them on how can they help children, adjust to these big, numerous, and I think very impacting changes that are going on in their life? We agree that it's going to be temporary, but right now we're all going through it. How can teachers and school leaders help children adjust to this?
I think it's a question to answer as a leader of a school, because if you look at this entire picture, the main stakeholder for the school is the students and our children and the students. And unless and until these children are assured that things will be back, I wouldn't say normal, but things are not as bad as they appear to be. Is my voice clear, Priya?
No, actually, you're not very clear, Vasanthi.
Is it okay now?
Much better, much better. Thank you so much.
I just unplugged my audio jack and I decided to speak straight into the PC. Okay.
Sure.
Just to repeat what I said, basically we look at the students as the main stakeholders in this entire issue. And as Manjri pointed out, very rightly so in her opening statements, what these children are undergoing, it's very difficult to map right now, but constantly a pulse has to be felt in terms of speaking to parents and keeping on track with them all the time. It could be an offline school, so what? But then if we can get into touch with like we are doing classes for our children right now, and I was in a session prior to this where so much of talk was happening about online classes. And I strongly do not subscribe to this continuous whole day online class, which could actually kill initiatives in kids and stress them more than they already are. So I feel somewhere leaders have got to take this big call against what is actually suitable for their children. Secondly, when you're talking about anxiety or stress or maybe depression, I'm more worried about the children who finish their senior secondary and their secondary school exams. These are the kids who seem have some kind of uncertainty in the future, and schools need to reassure them that things are fine, because there are boards of education which are responsible for ensuring that things will happen properly. Exams must be conducted, it's a matter of time, and we have to reassure these kids all the time, because the senior secondary, they would be into the anxiety zone of what's going to happen next. It's already June, July, and we haven't even done the entrances yet. And you would have these class 10 children who haven't probably gotten to admissions into other schools, and they are hanging here and there. And these are the kids we are really worried about, this 10th and 12th, the adolescents, and they're the ones who can quickly jump into a depression. And the parents at home, how much they would be able to feel that pulse, because these children could sometimes coil into themselves at that age, that the senior secondary age, they would not even come out with it. So this is the challenge where schools will have to open its windows of, I think, the web to our children now and tell them to come to us. I have many of my children sending me personal messages and asking me to call back. All that they want is, the principal to give them a reassuring tone. Don't worry, it's all right. And you're not alone. That's the main thing. Don't think that you're all alone in this battle. There are lakhs and lakhs of children who are as uncertain as you are. So the government will take care and ensure that all of you are on board. And this reassurance, I think, is important. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vasanti. Okay, Trupti, my question to you would be in the similar vein, but as a mental health care worker, as a psychologist, what is it that we can do, for even school counselors who are working within the school system, right? How can we help children and their parents and teachers to cope better? Yeah. And what can they do within this online schooling, so to say, to help them, help us all cope better?
Okay, thank you, Smita, first for inviting me. And I think I'd like to take from Dr. Manjari said that the key here is that the children and their family members, because in India, many people live in extended families. You have grandparents, uncles, everybody. I think the first thing is, as a family, they need to come together. The second thing is that parents and kind of elders in the family don't need to create kind of anxiety on a day-to-day basis, because this is what is happening in many homes. Watching the news, now that the newspaper has come, people are opening the newspaper and seeing the news, and there's a lot of discussion which is amounting to fear. Now, when the child is watching the parents fearful of their future, what is going to happen with the child? So I feel there are three things that we need to focus on. One is positive stroking. We need to teach parents how to positively stroke their children, and children how to positively stroke their parents. Because after all, every kind of relationship is mutual. It's not only we doing everything for the children. Children have an opportunity today to do things for others. And I think that is something that we need to tell our children. That guys, you're at home, you're spending time with your parents, you're observing these small nuances of your parents. You know how they sit, how they eat, what they chat about, who are their friends, how they can conversing with them, what are the kind of words that they're speaking. It's very important. I always say that yoga is okay, moving your hands and legs and doing all those exercises. But one of the biggest yoga is Shabda Yoga. How are you utilizing your words to create a positive impact? And that's something I believe that today we can teach both the children and their parents. The second thing, Smita, I believe, is some kind of permission. Some permission needs to be given to children to express. They say if you express, you can't get kind of depressed. So the ability, I would say that we've taken away the ability from children to express their emotions, to authentically speak what they feel. And I truly believe that if children are given that permission from their parents first, because we are giving them permission all the time, but that's not enough, right? The parents need to give them permission that, if you're feeling upset, you feel angry at something what I said, or you're feeling sad, I give you permission to cry. Because I too am feeling the same. So let's just sit together and vent out our feelings to each other. I think this is some permission that needs to be given. Possibly as a school counselor, you can have a meeting with the children and their caregivers. Sit with them. Talk to them about the fact that you need to allow each other to express. Right. Don't hide your emotions. Hiding your emotions will get you nowhere. And the third bit is creating some kind of environment at home where there is talk apart from studies. Because there's a lot of talk about the exams are going to take place, when will the exams take place, oh my God, next year, whether you're going to go to the next class and your marks and all this marks, oriented environment needs to change at home. So why not talk about, I told one of my parents who called me up and he was very anxious. And I said to him, why don't you share about your anxiety that happened when you were in the 10th grade? At that time, there was nothing like this, yet you were anxious, right? So what is it that made you anxious? Share your anxiety with your child. I feel these are the three things that I would tell, children and their caregivers to do.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And, I think what's really come out from, what all of you are saying is, leading towards, I think, how perhaps having compassion for ourselves, as well as, sharing between each other, since we're all at home with each other. I think that's going to be one big way, or the big pathway by which we are going to be able to cope with the current situation. So like they're saying, physical distancing, yes, but if we are actually socially together, I think that's really going to take us through. Dr. Manjari, my next question is for you, and that has to do with, with children who have experienced loss and grief just now as a part of the situation, right? But they're still attending classes. They're still expected to do what everyone else is doing, right? What are your thoughts on how can the teacher probably be able to help the child? How can a school counselor help this child who's actually experiencing grief due to a loss of a family member? Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a grandparent, etc.
So, doctor, I would like to say that the loss of a death one, like grief in children, it takes a lot of time, obviously, to settle down. And I think, especially now during COVID and during this entire pandemic, it's going to take even more time for kids to settle down. So I think we have to, come to acceptance that, forget on, school, forget academics right now. If we can only connect with the child, understand. A lot of times when children have experienced the loss of a death of a close member, many times if you talk to children, they have this unexplainable guilt. For some reason, they feel that, they could have in some way prevented that death from happening, or, something they kind of feel that, I fought with my mother and then, she passed away. So it was the stress of the fight, or I could have done something. Or children have this magical thinking. So at times when they're angry, they, tell parents or think in their minds that, I'm upset with you. I think the world would be a better place to live without you. So even children without the pandemic situation, when they come to terms with, their mother or father passing away, it's very, very difficult. So imagine now in today's times, it's even more difficult because they're not going to their friends, they're not meeting other relatives who are generally their caregivers during such time. So I would say if any child has, God forbid, experienced the loss of one of the parents, I think it's of utmost important for us to just sit down and talk to the child, be there for the child, let the child take his own time to overcome this grief. Let's not pressurize the child about getting back to online schooling. I think if the child has a close bond with the teacher, of course, she can connect with him in other ways. She can talk to him on the phone, message him, etc. But during school online classes, it will be difficult. She cannot cater to that one child, and there will be other distractions also. So I think for this specific child, we'll have to just do whatever we can to help this child to cope. And of course, ask about anxiety, ask about what he's feeling, if there is any kind of guilt, because children don't tell very easily, but when you ask, they may express this guilt in themselves.
Right. And I mean, my thought also is that, just like I think it's the same situation, like whether we have children with special needs, and at this time a child with a loss and with grief will also become a child with a special need. Okay. And I think for that, during this period, I think teachers and school coordinators, etc., are going to have to stretch themselves that little bit and probably spend some one-to-one time away from the classroom, so that they can perhaps pitch in, and help this child come forward. And most schools nowadays are also having school counselors, and I think this is where school counselors will play a big role. So again, Trupti, same question to you. How within the school environment can a school counselor, can a mental health care worker help a child cope with the loss of a dear one, a parent, a grandparent?
I think, Smita, it's very important. Loss is something, like Dr. Manjari has said, that it's going to take time for the child to actually overcome. But I think as a teacher, as a counselor, we need to talk to the child about the fact that what is the good thing that happened when you go with this person, and try and get the child to remember some positive memories of this person and what this person meant to her. Rather than asking the child all the time, oh, you're feeling upset, or you're feeling sad, don't feel sad, don't feel sad. I think this is such a horrible statement to tell somebody who's feeling sad not to feel sad. In the sense, not give actually permission to the child to feel what the child is feeling. And basically, allow the child to express authentically what the child feels. I am feeling sad. Okay, that's okay, darling. We all feel sad sometimes. And as a counselor, some kind of counter kind of transference also can take place at this time, where you speak about the loss that you have suffered.
Right.
Because this is when it works. You know, where the child suddenly is wanting to listen to you and then ask you, my God, you're such a big person. How are you feeling the loss? You should be able to cope. And then you share with the child, no, darling, even I had that, you know, lovely relationship with so-and-so, and this is what happened to me. And that opens, like it breaks the dam, you know, and then emotions and conversations can keep flowing. And the second thing is, whether you have a loss or not, this is the time when counselors and special educators can talk to children on actually life skills. I truly believe that this is the time when life skills can be inculcated in children. You know, so that's something that
I'm coming to that question also. You know, it's a major question. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. Vasanthi, I have a question on the similar thing that, you know, if we have children, and from the news we are getting, we are only, you know, our cases are only going to be increasing. Unfortunately, we are going to be dealing with this more and more. How do you think peers, okay, the other children, can extend some support to a child who is, you know, grieving, has experienced the death of a loved one? How can his friends, how can the other peers help this child?
That's going to be the first challenge that schools will have to get ready with when we reopen on the face-to-face basis. Because all of them are not going to walk into the portals with the same background. There are going to be children who are people who possibly recovered at home, and there could be children who walk into the portals of the school where they have lost someone very close and dear. It could be even a neighbor whom they witnessed who passed away, and this neighbor was there all the time, all these days. But what we have to remember is, and I think both the counselors before me, I'm not a counselor, but I'm speaking on behalf of children as a principal, but both the counselors before me have expressed it so beautifully that you can't rub it in, you know, the loss. More than that, coping with the loss is more important than the loss itself. The loss is anyway the reality that we know, but children may not know that reality. They can't accept it. So that loss, which is a reality, coping with that loss, the teacher will definitely have to take the class on board, and the children need to know that they can't rub it in by saying, I'm feeling so sorry for you, and that's going to simply escalate the issues. The second thing is, we can't actually push children into a mode of self-pity also. So they'll be sitting in a corner and moping away when actually they should be moving forward. So this is where observation of the teacher. And secondly, schools need to actually get into, if possible, the background of children before they come. How many of our kids are walking to our schools that day who have a problem behind them? If we don't know that, there's nothing wrong in opening a circle time in the class and talking about the COVID virus. Just letting their minds out. And, you know, if you're going to be non-judgmental in a circle time activity with children, and the age doesn't matter here, the problem does.
Absolutely.
And it's okay for children to cling on to their grief and cry for some time. And as the counselors pointed out, there's nothing wrong in bursting out and crying because it's a pent-up emotion. And I don't believe you should push that pent-up emotion further inside. It could end up with other kind of physical disorders also. So I think it's very critical that schools have to provide these facilities, and we don't have to rub it in. I'm going to sit here and find out what went wrong. Rather, we're going to have a circle time to welcome everybody back into the school. And we have to just push the positive word along. And when we talk so much about happy school, Smita, I think the school will have to work very hard on pushing this happy school concept. Happiness is a part of life.
Yes. In fact, you know, Vasanthi, thank you so much. In fact, I was reading something very important. About some schools talking as to how they're going to handle this when they get face-to-face. And one of the things that they spoke about was as to how, just like you said, do a little bit of homework before the school start. So get to know in a way which are the children who are impacted by this on the very front line. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then use other children, okay, as a peer group. So set up like a little peer council for every classroom. Okay, set up a little peer council for every classroom so that within themselves also they are able to kind of include children who are, you know, kind of undergoing this grief, include them into, you know, this circle, which will then they will, you know, they will have kind of peer buddies and peer mentors given to them, all right, who will then be with them for a period of time. And we can be also rotating these peers.
Absolutely.
Okay? So this was something I found very, very practical, very doable, and this is practical and doable for absolutely every school, you know, across board. So that's something I thought I would, you know, I would share with you. I have a question. My next question is, so you know, we're talking about coping and compassion, right? And there is a wonderful quote from the Dalai Lama. Okay, he said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And if you yourself want to be happy, practice compassion.
Yes.
Okay. So my question to you and, you know, each one of you, and so I will start with Dr. Manjari. What does the word compassion mean to you? Or what are the very first words also that are associated with this word compassion, you know, that come up to you? Dr. Manjari, you're on mute. Dr. Manjari, you're on mute.
That's a very beautiful quote you mentioned. There's another quote by the Dalai Lama itself saying that love and compassion are not luxuries, they're necessities in life, you know, so they're not luxuries anyway. And we unfortunately forget that they are necessary. And that's basically EQ, emotional quotient, as we call it, when we keep telling parents from a young age, do not focus so much on academics, but, you know, start teaching life skills, focus on the emotional quotient. When you hear the word compassion, I think for me personally, just hearing the word itself brings a smile to your face. I think that's compassion. You just feel for somebody, you know. So there's it's basically something like empathy in action. So empathy, like as psychiatrists, obviously as mental health professionals, we are trained in understanding other people's emotions. But I think compassion is one step further, where you also, you know, understand the emotions and also help and reach out to the children, reach out to them. And I think children, of course, it doesn't come naturally. It's not there right from birth. I think it's a lot from what we teach them, from what we do rather than what we teach them. So when parents model this kind of behavior, I have seen children pick it up really well. And you know, you will see 3-year-olds acting so mature and so compassionate, it will literally break your heart, you know. And I think children really have it at that age. Sometimes adverse life circumstances makes them reduce this factor, but I think compassion is something that all kids can very well, you know, they can be nurtured with compassion. And in today's time, of course, it's very important. So I think the first step for compassion is just, you know, learning from parents' behavior. It's about modeling, and one way is increasing their emotional vocabulary. So right from a young age, when you teach emotions to a small child, like, you know, now how are you feeling? So you know, you're not feeling well. This happened. How does it make you feel? Increase their emotional vocabulary. Tell them what different emotions are. At the same time, tell them that you can't be happy all the time. You know, it's okay to feel sad. There are a lot of parents who come and say, I don't want my child. So the typical helicopter parents, I don't want my child to feel sadness or discomfort. You know, you're doing really bad stuff for your child if you have that thought in your mind. So let them experience all kinds of emotions. Only then will they really value the happiness that they have.
Thank you. Thank you. Your thoughts on this, Trupti? My only recommendation to all the panelists is that, you know, if we can be a little brief, because then we can take more questions, and, you know, we have questions in the chat also, and I'd like to take that next one. So again, just your thought on what's your definition, what's your understanding of compassion, Trupti?
Well, you know, Smita, the thing is that we as a society are always focused on doing things, and we're not focused on being. Just being somebody, being happy, being sad, being whatever, joyful. It's all about doing. So like Dr. Manjari is saying, even my take on this is that parents need to model that being behavior. You know, you don't have to keep doing things all the time. You know, I'll tell you an example very quickly. My sister's son was here for a short time, and I saw him sitting on a chair doing nothing. And just like an Indian parent or, you know, an aunt, I went and asked him, what are you doing? And he said, I'm not doing anything. I'm just sitting, you know. So I think as adults, we have to start changing. Because this is something that's come from our children. Can you imagine a small child is sick saying, I'm bored? I mean, just imagine what that poor child has been doing that he feels he needs to continue doing. Otherwise, he uses the word bored.
Being bored. Right.
So compassion is just about being whatever you are, rather than
Right.
doing things. I think that's most important. And of course, in judgment, parents have to get out of judgment. We judge every single thing that we do. So that's another area that people need to work on.
Right. Thank you. And Vasanthi, lastly, over to you. What's your take on compassion?
Yes, compassion, actually, according to me, is a wholehearted merger into another person's situation without expectation of any return in that gesture. Compassion has to be so natural. You cannot be compassionate and expect something back in return. It has to be just unconditional, like love. And compassion is a quality that can be nurtured. And I worked on this. This was a word that was, running in my mind from the morning, Smita, when I saw your title about the bully in the class and compassion, and also about coping with it. And I feel both are two sides of the coin, the bully and the bullied. And when you talk about compassion, and also the bully needs to have the compassion, and coping with the bully has to be the skill for the one who's bullied. So you see how both these twin things happen. And these bullies need to actually get nurtured into compassion, because they do not understand the pain they're causing to the ones they're bullying in a classroom. Specific.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. No, so in fact, I'm so glad you brought this connection up, and that's where actually I was heading. Yeah.
Okay.
That, is compassion going to be one big way, by which we are going to be able to cope with the situation? And that's why I use Dalai Lama's shared Dalai Lama's that quote in the sense saying that, we actually feel most satisfied, most happy when we've actually helped someone. You'll realize at the end of the day, the really good feeling comes not when you've done something for yourself. We're doing it all the time, but it's when we're helping someone else and when we've shown that compassion for someone else. So right now, it's a difficult situation for everyone. We're all going through similar, situations one way or another, which is the silver lining. However, my question to you is, how can we, who are all working in the field, with children, with schools, with teachers, and we have a lot of teachers and school people on board today, how can we inculcate coping and compassion as life skills? Because what I am still seeing is that even though we move from the offline into the online mode, that race for achievement we're still running the race, and we seem to be running it even faster. Why? I mean, what is the need for that? Thus, I feel that it's time to pause. It's time to still ourselves. And isn't this an opportunity to actually build up these skills of coping, resilience, compassion in a very realistic manner amongst the children? So if I can ask you to give me just one thought each, one point each, which will go out to our participants, to our audience, as to what they can take back on how they can build compassion, resilience, any one of these in the children in the classroom. If we can start with compassion, that will be great, because that's the focus and the theme of today. So, Trupti, would you want to go on that?
Well, I would say just one word I can say: sharing is caring. Let children and parents share everything in the household, from household work to cooking, to cleaning, to dusting, to folding clothes. Because I think when you share, it means you care. That will build up compassion, is what I would like to say.
Thank you. Manjari, your thoughts on this?
Totally agree with Dr. Trupti. I would say, talking about emotions, helping them to express their emotions, making, telling them it's okay, and sharing your emotions. Sometimes we get scared to tell our children that I'm scared, I'm worried. But if you want your children to know it's okay, you need to tell them too that, we are living in difficult times. I'm having a tough time. And sharing that with your child, I think your child will pick up that he can also share with you.
Right, right. And Vasanti, there's a question here which
Yes.
says that how can teachers incorporate compassion into the classroom while teaching? Okay. And
Yes.
today it's an online teaching, right?
True.
So how can teachers incorporate compassion into their teaching?
I think compassion by itself is a very demonstrable quality, Smita. I cannot expect children to suddenly develop a compassion. They don't even know what it is all about. See, this is not, it's not the cognitive domain or the, where you're teaching things to remember. It is the affective domain of students. And many of us ignore that affective domain of teaching all the time. We are all into the cognitive domain, maybe the psychomotor domain of Bloom's, and happily we run our classes. It's time we put those aside. I'm not saying ignore them or delete them, but I'm saying refocus on the affective domain. And teachers have to first lead by example. And I also believe compassion has this fantastic ripple effect. That one little act of compassion is going to lead to a ripple effect. And like this Well Done, which was spoken about so much, I think it's very important to highlight the positive attitudes of compassion. Maybe in your assembly, caught in the act, doing the good thing, somewhere you've got to push this across so that everyone knows there's a beautiful ripple effect of compassion. It's a quality that can't be measured in a test or a report card. It is a demonstrable quality that schools have to nurture and practice all the time. Catch them young, right time to do it. And when we grow into adults, they're going to be compassionate because we grew with it. I think schools have to play that role now. Thank you.
So again, Vasanti, glad you spoke about this because I'm going to introduce my next question, as well. And, my next question again is that, yes, we're talking about compassion. We're talking about resilience. It's not going to happen all of a sudden. But, even when we are moving from here on to there, my thought is that the current situation is actually providing an opportunity. It is a crisis. It is a traumatic situation, but it's actually providing an opportunity, for us to be able to actually practice all these things and not just preach about them, right? Yes. So, Trupti, my question, I will start off with you actually. What might be the impact? We're talking about compassion, we're talking about resilience. Okay, when we are building this up, what will be the impact of this compassion, etc., on how children are going to fare in the long term? What is going to be the impact of all these good things in the long term? Whether it is their academic performance and whether it is them growing up as good human beings. What's the impact on them going to be?
So Smita, one thing I want to say as we're all talking about compassion and, adults showing compassion, I first believe that adults themselves need some coaching. Because adults by themselves, I mean, I look at teachers, I look at parents, they are not really compassionate people because they've been so busy earning money and raising a family that, okay, they can read a book on, somebody has written, but I don't think most adults and especially teachers practice compassion. So I loved, kind of Vasanti's idea of a circle to be made in a classroom. But I think that also needs to be coached. That's one thing. So I feel that this is the right time, Smita, for online coaching, both for teachers and for children. Right. So as a counselor, I would take a class with my teachers and children together. And do various activities, let's say empathetic activities and, EQ activities, where I create a teacher-student buddy and let them start dealing with each other first, because that can be translated very easily when they actually come to school. So I feel there has to be a radical change in the way we are actually counseling. Right. Because we can't use those methodologies that we've been using. Now, how do I translate what I have learned in this online scenario where the teacher and the student both are going through the same issues?
Right, right.
I think that is something that we need to start working on. Then it can be translated very easily when they actually come to school, because that connect will be there. And the second thing, Smita, very quickly I want to say is, it's important that teachers, when they take these online classes, they address children by their names. That means, because I find this happening, you know, it's just like the teacher is sitting in front of the comp and speaking the lesson, but there is not much interaction. That's another thing that teachers need to do. And they need to start the class with some thought for the day, or just some story that they've heard, and then give the children some 5 minutes to respond to that, you know, and create that empathetic connect with the child. Smita, I feel that is lacking.
Okay, I really liked what you said about, you know, that even though we've got to do this, but if we are expecting teachers to do it, then they are going to need some coaching in this, because otherwise, you know, we're just taking it for granted that people who've otherwise been engaged, so to say, and trained for doing what, you know, Vasanthi is saying, the more cognitive aspect of teaching, if they've now got to take over as frontline counselors, so to say, in the classroom. So, you know, very interestingly, what I do is that I usually follow up these Wednesday webinars on a Saturday with a focused workshop, which is, you know, related to the topic. And this Saturday, I actually have a workshop which is on counseling skills for teachers. And I'm going to be focusing on the counseling skills that teachers will require, generally, of course, but at this point of time. So that whether they're on their online classes or whether when they get into a face-to-face situation, what exactly are they going to be looking at, and what are some of the skills that they can develop. So I think, Trupti, that, you know, thank you for bringing about that coaching bit, because that's really what I'm going to do, at least with one group, about 30 people on Saturday. And of course, I look forward to many more coming, and, you know, all of us doing that kind of work, you know. So, you know, the same question to you, Manjari. You've been working with children and adolescents, you know. Any one thing that you can, you know, give, you know, what teachers can do, you know, as far as, you know, as far as helping children in this situation? What can they do? Like she said, teachers need coaching. But what would you have to say? What is the one?
As Dr. Trupti said, you know, calling out by the child's name, I think that's very important. I had a four-year-old. There are online classes, unfortunately, for 4-year-olds also. He was very apprehensive about attending this class online. The first day, the best part, I mean, when the mother asked him, why did you enjoy your online classes? Because he felt that after 2 months also, teacher remembers my name. The teacher called out by his name, and that was what struck him, and that was what made him happy after a very long time. So I think, of course, that personal touch that you have for children is extremely important. I think for younger children, we, rather than focusing on academics also, it has to be through play, it has to be through conversation, it has to be just, you know, fun for the child. Only the purpose of doing it is keeping the child connected with the teacher. Many times children open up to teachers more frequently than they open up to their own parents. And I think another thing that today's children or youth lack is gratitude. And I think that's also an important part of compassion. That's why I brought it up. And I think there was one mother who came, I'll just briefly tell about it. She came and said, I think my child just doesn't have gratitude. We've given him everything in life, but he doesn't value what we give. Obviously, it comes from the parents. But I think one good way that teachers and parents can follow is when the child is very young itself, encourage like this gratitude journal or gratitude jar. So I had recommended to a family that all of you, not only the children, even the parents and the children, every day you write what you're grateful for. It can be anything simple. And Sunday morning, everybody, when you're free, sit with each other and read out to each other about your entire week. I think that works so well for the family. I mean, I think that's something that you can really inculcate. And because we have time with our children, because we're all, I think parents and teachers should take this time to, you know, teach children all these things rather than academics.
Right. So we have an interesting question here, and I'm going to kind of, you know, connect it to, you know, even what my next thing was for parents. Okay. And this question here on chat is, what are some healthy coping ways for adults in this situation? So when we're talking about adults, let's look at the roles we're talking about within, you know, this theme today. And your adults are your parents, and your adults are your teachers, right? So, Trupti, my question to you is, how can we help parents cope with this situation? Just one or two things, and then I'll move on to Vasanthi as far as the teachers are concerned. Yeah, how can we help them?
So I would say that helping parents is that the way I'm actually doing for my school parents is I have a workshop with my parents of different classes. So standard 1, standard 2, standard 3 parents. And I just talk about what is it that you're going through. You know, like if they're having some kind of financial issues or they're having some work-related issues. Now it becomes very difficult. So I'm taking smaller groups of parents, because if I take 120 parents together, there's not going to be much effect. So I'm taking small groups of parents, and then I talk to them just like this, like a kind of webinar, or rather a meet like that. And you know, parents have started talking about the kind of problems they are going through, because they have nobody else to talk to. That's the biggest problem now. So I think is helping.
So you mean like setting up a support group, like a little support group where they can talk to each other, they can talk to you, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And I think, so Vasanthi, how do you think we can support teachers? Because they're not coming with nothing, right? I mean, they have their own issues and their own baggage and probably their own losses and griefs that they are dealing with. How can we help them cope?
Yes, Smita. I think what we have to look at is this teacher is also a parent, is also a sister, is also a mother, is also a daughter-in-law, a daughter. Look at the multiple roles that this teacher is playing. So at home, and probably the crisis has brought in a financial crunch in families, and this is also affecting teachers a lot, because if they have husbands whose factories or companies don't pay them well, the teacher is also afraid that the same could happen in school. And I could see the kind of relief my teachers had when we started paying their salaries, and they thanked me profusely, and I said, no, it is our duty to pay you. What are you thanking me for? But they were overwhelmed because they were facing this difficulty. So somewhere we have to put ourselves in the teacher's place. And you talk about classes from home. Believe me, it is far, far tougher than coming to school and teaching. Because this teacher will have to wind up all her work. She's got little kids running about, and she's got to get into her so-called classes online. I think that's the worst torture a teacher can face. So we'll have to definitely give the teacher the space and the time to manage her classes with not the whole of it being online. It's crazy, I think. If the teacher is able to support something to the students by way of a pre-recorded video that goes for learning, I think it's good enough. I'm not talking about YouTube, I'm talking about teachers recording. And in my school, we took a call on that. We took a parental survey, and we said, we're not going to buy that whole online stuff. No, we're going to distribute this. And there are struggling learners who cannot take it at one go in the online class. We got to think of the struggling learners in the class. And we just decided this is how we'll do it. Teachers need to be looked on in a very compassionate and, more importantly, empathetic manner, Smita. It's not driving classes to be accountable to parents. Not at all.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Vasanthi. And I think from what I've heard from all of you, I think what I could summarize and what I can understand is that I think we need to be heard. Yeah. Each of us need that someone listens to us. And then we have to also find ways in how we can help people do that. Yeah. Like Trupti does, she has these small, in her own way, circle times. You know, she has support groups where people are actually listening to each other, empathizing with each other. And Vasanthi, like you said, I think that's really something that school leaders should organize for their own teachers. Because, you know, if teachers can talk to each other, can share, then I think they will be better fortified, better prepared to then do it for their children. You know, if that's not so, then you can't have you can't have the healthcare workers, you know, doing it when they are going in with their own baggage. Okay, absolutely. There is an interesting question, and Vasanthi, that goes back to you. How will you convince teachers and parents that studies are secondary at this moment, at least, to all the other life skills? So just a brief from you, and then I will take it on to the others.
I think, Smita, ever since I founded my Shiksha school 30 years now, I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've been trying to descale the academics and upscale the co-scholastic development of children. And sometime back when Mr. Ganguly was our chairman, I think somebody has come into the presentation area. Okay, if people can hear my voice. Mr. Ganguly has beautifully presented the UNESCO report to us as principals, saying clearly that those 3 C's are killing us: comparison, competition, and compulsion. He said these 3 things are killing us. They have to be replaced by collaboration, cooperation, and choice. And I've been batting for this for 30 years. And I'm very happy to say that our school does get, automatically the academic results will come in, but I make sure that we are focusing on holistic development. Otherwise, I think somewhere we are making this big mistake of assuming that holistic development is happening, and it is not. Schools can talk about it, but practice what you preach. I think it's important. And my teachers are here in this meeting today, lots of them here today, and I think they'll vouch for it that I bat for holistic development of my children in the true sense of the word. Otherwise, the whole thing would be a lip service to our children, honestly.
Thank you, Vasanthi, and thank you for sharing those 3 C's.
Yes.
You know, I'm going to try and really recall them and use them in wherever I'm speaking with teachers, etc., because I think that's a really nice thing. So there's a question for let's Manjari, if you can take this next one, which has come into the chat box, and it says that can the panelists share some strategies for children on handling pessimism? Okay, because there has been this recent suicide of a celebrity, and everyone's talking about it. And in fact, I am right now getting questions on a particular, couple of cases we are working with, where the parents are concerned about this because the children have actually spoken that, oh, if I'm not able to pass my exams, then I'll do what so-and-so guy did. Or this girl is saying, if I am not able to kind of get through this particular period, then this is what I'm going to do. What can you, share with the audience on what they can take back to help children, to help their adolescents, both in school and at home, on how we can handle this situation, especially when talk of a celebrity suicide comes about?
So the sad part is, unfortunately, doctor, it takes a suicide or a life of somebody for us to get talking about mental health. I mean, there is a strong rise in cases yesterday, and a lot of them have been coming up with this, and that's only because they have heard about the suicide, and that's the sad part. I mean, I wish we were more open about mental health. But yes, another biggest myth in everybody's minds is talking about suicide. You're planting the thought of suicide in the person's head, which is the biggest myth as of every parent has. They shy away from talking about suicide, thinking that their children will get this idea. No, it's absolutely false. You have to ask questions. You have to talk about suicide. You have to let them know what led the person to do that and how that can be prevented by talking about your emotions, by taking help if it is necessary from a mental health professional. So I think parents, I think after this, it's important that you speak to children about this, about their thoughts and about what they have, garnered from this incident, and speak freely to them. When parents communicate with their children open up and, share their feelings as well.
Okay. Trupti, your thoughts on this, Trupti?
Smita, there's one word that always comes to my mind when such things happen, and that is and that is kind of flexibility of thinking. We are unable to psychologically become flexible. We are unable to understand the workings of our mind. And we believe that our mind is like a solid kind of entity, and so somebody has done something, so I will do the same. But that's untrue. So we have fed our mind lots of untrue assumptions. That's the first thing. And second is that we have to teach everybody that there is something that our mind is like a kind of elastic, it is flexible. So let us teach people how to be flexible. There are options in any particular situation, how we act. There's not only one option. There's no single option to trying to live your life, or even for that matter, trying to die. There are multiple options, right? Why somebody chooses a certain option is because he is not looking at other options. That's all. So I think we should provide everybody with options. There are options to think, and these options are viable options. They are not just options. There is so much things that you can do which is going to help you to feel better, to think better. I truly believe, Sunita, like I'm taking classes for my children on making them understand what the mind is. I'm not going to talk to them about geography and history. I'm going to talk to them about the mind, because that is, I would say, something that nobody talks about. No one has ever told me in school or college, how do I manage my mind? They told me how to manage money. They told me how to manage my husband. They told me how to manage my child. But nobody taught me how to manage my mind. And it's high time, Smita, that through these online platforms, this topic becomes like, sells like hotcake, let me tell you.
Right.
And everybody is wanting to know this.
Correct.
This is something I would do.
In fact, thank you so much, Trupti. Thank you for sharing. In fact, there's a nice question here, Vasanthi, and I'm going to give that to you. This is by Ramya. And she says, can an approach be taken where before each class, some motivation or affirmation can be done for students, say like for 2 minutes, 5 minutes. So instead of spending the time and saying, good morning, sit down, whatever, can we start a class, doing that? I mean, I would say, of course we can. But let's say, Vasanthi, if you were to do it in your school, how would you logistically manage that? Is that something that can be managed on a daily basis?
It's a beautiful question, and I have lovely answers for that, Smita, because in my school, we are very particular that the day begins on a positive note with mindful meditation. Right. I think we had discussions with you during our Happy Classroom training. And I make it a point to even start the class, even CBSE training now that we do on Happy Classrooms, we take participants through mindful meditation. You know why? It's the first step towards understanding this mind of ours. And this mind of ours is like, it jumps all the time. Children have to know that emotions keep changing so fast. And therefore, if this mindful meditation and awareness of yourself happens, it's the first step towards self-awareness. And we do it in all our classes. My teachers here know about that. We start the class. I think those 3 minutes are critical for the fate of that class. And one of my gurus in the CBSE, Mr. Balasubramaniam, he has always motivated us by telling me the first 3 minutes of entry of the teacher into the class and the way she starts it is going to decide the fate of that class. So I tell my teachers, please start it the right way. Don't worry about your so-called syllabus covering it. It's supposed to be uncovered anyway. At least start the class well. Let us do this mindful meditation every day, and it's working in school. Children, they have to cope with one class after the other. The previous class would have been quite bad with them. A bad test or whatever. How do you help them to come back to your class? And therefore, it is the responsibility of the teacher to settle that down, that mind which is so flexible. And children start assuming and concluding a lot of things on their own by external observations actions of people. It's the way children act. So I feel mindful meditation holds the key. It's mindful meditation.
Okay. Right. So thank you so much, Vasanthi. And I would say that, as per time, we have, I know that we can go on and on discussing. And like Trupti said, this really should be the topic which should be, so to say, is the need of the hour. And that's something we should be taking up, and we will be taking up in our forthcoming webinars. And so I would just like, I'll start with Manjari and say, if you have a closing statement for this particular session, that, a little message that our participants can take home. And I would then go on from one panelist to another, and then we can close the session. Yes, Manjari.
I would just say one sentence. All of us are going through a hard time. You really cannot judge a book by its cover. You don't know what the other person is going through. Teachers are going through tough time. Parents are good. So this is not the time to point fingers at anybody saying that, this is bad, this is good. Let's just be a little more empathetic towards each other, and let's be more compassionate, as our topic says.
Thank you. Thank you. Trupti?
Well, I'll just say that there is somebody out there you can reach out to. If you're in trouble, if you're feeling depressed, if you're sad, if you're anxious, if you're angry, just reach out. It could be your friend, your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, or your child who's at home. Just
Right.
reach out. I would say that.
And at this point, I will also say, good you mentioned the reach out. I would also say that, you know, there are professionals, mental health care workers like you, like us, who are very much available and who would be of really great help, you know. So I think
And-
it's important that people reach out at this time.
And I just want to say, Smita, this is the best time for actually mental health workers, because here
Right.
we are sitting in India dealing with issues which people are having all over the world.
Yes,
And
yes.
I mean, I have people calling me up from any part of the world and I'm able to help them. I mean, what
Right.
better time to make
Right.
mental health a prime
Yes.
subject for discussions.
Right, right. Thank you, thank you, Vasanthi. Let's let's end with your closing statement for
Sure.
the audience.
Yes, Meeta, I think it's been one of the best sessions ever that I've attended. With you around, it should be so. My closure statement would be an appeal to all the teachers that children are our future. We make the mistake of calling them future citizens. They're already citizens when they are born, please. So we have to first remove that nomenclature and say, children are our future. And I believe, Smita, that future has to be treated very carefully, because they are going to impact us in big ways. You're worried about resources which are getting depleted. We're worried about water resources. We are worried about mineral resources. I think we have to look into depletion of certain resources and our children. They are the future. Take care of them. Handle them with precious care, because they are going to take care of all of us too. All other resources will be taken care if this resource is supported. That's my last
Thank you.
thought.
Thank you. So a very big thank you again to Dr. Trupti, Dr. Manjari, and Dr. Vasanthi. It was an absolute pleasure to have you with us. We look forward to it again sometime in the future. And again, to all the participants, that we are having a workshop on counseling skills for teachers. This is on this coming Saturday. And this is again from 5 to 7 p.m. It's a 2-hour workshop. Yeah. And you can reach out to our team on the same way that you have been contacted or you have connected with us for this webinar. So thank you again, and pleasure having you all on, and we will be in touch. Thank you, everyone.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. The best sessions
Bye-bye.
ever attended. And
Thank you.
should be so with you there, Smita. No doubt about that.
Thank you very much, Vasanthi.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Smita.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Take care. Thank you.